So we can do all kinds of things in this sort of formal mathematical kind of world. We can also kind of jump out into the real world of sort of practical facts about the world. So let's say we say, what's the GDP of France? There's the result, there's a plot of the history, and here's a few other things that we might immediately want to know about GDP, and we press more, we can get to more stuff. If we want to, we can kind of dress this up. We could say, what is the GDP of France, for example, question mark. And it'll go off and be able to figure out that we're really asking the same question we asked before, give us the same answer. Let's maybe say we want to know what's the GDP of France divided by Italy, okay? So we as humans can pretty much tell what that question means, and so can it. And because all this data is kind of organized in such a way that it's computable, it can immediately work out, okay, it knows this value, it knows that value, it can divide them, it can get the result. We can say show the details, and it'll show us here the result from that. Okay, or we could say something like, I don't know, internet users in Europe, for instance. And now there'll be a bunch of data that it has about that, it'll go through and look up the data that it has and try and figure out a reasonable way to summarize that data. So it'll tell us the total number of internet users, the country with the highest number. It'll give us some histograms, and then it might give us a table down here of the various countries. We can ask it to show more of those.
Only 93 internet users in Vatican City?
So it claims.
I guess they have other sources.
Yes, right. So we can go and ask, let's say we pick a place. Let's try something like Lexington. Oh, I realize, okay, so I'm connected here through a VPN tunnel to a machine at our company headquarters in Illinois. So it thinks I'm in Illinois. If it had thought that I was in Massachusetts, which I am, it probably would have defaulted to, it should have defaulted to Lexington, Massachusetts. As it is, it just defaulted to Lexington, Illinois, and told me something about Lexington, Illinois. Let's go and tell it we really want to talk about Lexington, Massachusetts here, because that's just down the road from here. So it can tell us a certain amount about Lexington. It says what the population is. It tells us that here are some nearby larger cities. It's telling us it's a very toasty 91 degrees in Lexington, Massachusetts right now. Let's go and ask it. Let's ask it a little bit more detail about the weather in Lexington, Massachusetts. So now it'll go and figure that out, and it'll tell us, it'll give us a summary at the top. Here's the temperature and so on. Then it'll show us a plot of, that's the temperature as a function of time for the past week in Lexington, Massachusetts, and it's predicting, this is from weather forecast, it's predicting for the next few days, that's how the temperature will vary with time. Maybe we can go and say, okay, show us the last 10 years worth of weather in Lexington, Massachusetts, and there's the result, and you can see that it varies every year, from warmer in the summer to colder in the winter, all those kinds of things. We could, if we wanted to, we could kind of dig in more precisely, and we could say, weather on, let's try something like this, just some random date there. It'll go and hopefully be able to tell us on that particular day what the average temperature was. There's the pattern for the week around that day, and so on. Or we could go ahead and say something like, let's say we say something like Lexington, Massachusetts, and then we just type in Moscow here. And it'll probably, I don't know which I think it will pick by default the Moscow in Russia, and now it'll show us things about a comparison between those two cities. It'll show us, how we get from one to the other, how far it is, those kinds of things. We could go and on the right, we can, it'll give us a link to a Wikipedia page, for example, about Lexington, which we could go look at if we wanted kind of a more narrative discussion. This is, Wolfram Alpha is really concentrating on giving us just the facts about things. So maybe we can type in something like, we'll give it some unit of measure, let's say 5 miles per second, for example. And so it's, it'll say, okay, there's 5 miles per second. One thing it tries to do is to tell us something useful based on the input we gave. So useful things it can tell us are things like, what are some other units that might be good to give that speed in? What are some comparisons for that speed that might be useful in terms of understanding roughly what it is? Maybe we could try something else. Let's try 6,000 C, and let's see what it thinks that is. Okay, so it says, assuming that C is a unit, and then assuming it means degrees centigrade. Now it can tell us sort of conversions for 6,000 degrees centigrade. It'll tell us some other useful things, like that's the black body spectrum at 6,000 degrees. That's the color that a black object would be if heated to that temperature, those kinds of things. Or let's say we ask it, say something like, I don't know, $17 an hour. We can, now it'll give us a result about that based on just giving us sort of convenient conversions for that quantity. Or maybe we could type in something like 4,000 words if we're writing some essay or something. It'll tell us here are some sort of typical things. We can always drill down and say, show us more stuff here, and there's the result for some other kinds of quantities associated with 4,000 words. Or we could go and say, I don't know, we could start asking about materials, like let's say 333 grams of gold, and it'll probably be able to figure out. I have to say, I'm a little frustrated. It's running a little slower than I'm used to seeing it run. I don't know whether that's because of some strange condition, but anyway, I think when it's alive in the world, it'll be a tiny bit zippier than this. Okay, so it's telling us about, in this case, some number of grams of gold, and it's telling us its value. It's about $10,000 at current commodity prices, and here's the heat capacity of that amount of gold, all those kinds of things. Maybe we can go and, let's say we're doing chemistry, we can say, we could type in some chemical like, H2SO4, and now we could say something like, okay, let's say we're making 5 molar H2SO4. It can then compute what you would need to make that, and it'll tell us how to prepare something like that. Or we could tell it, let's say we typed in something like, well, it knows about lots of kinds of chemicals and so on. So let's say we type in caffeine. Okay, we can always go and actually compute things about this, so it'll know all kinds of stuff about caffeine. But we can say, what's the caffeine molecular weight? Or we could say, caffeine molecular weight divided by water, let's say. And it should just give us a result for that. Or we could go and say something like, I don't know, we could pick another material, like something like decane, let's say. And now we can go and ask it, what is decane? Okay, so there's some basic information about decane. Let's say, what's decane like at 2 atmospheres and 50 degrees centigrade? And now it'll have to dive in and try and compute from information about that material. It can compute that's the position in the phase diagram, and here are some particular properties of the material at that temperature and pressure, those kinds of things. Or let's pick another area. Let's do something. Let's say something medical. So let's say we go, we say LDL 180. So that might be a result from some medical test that somebody's been reported, and this will now kind of dive into some public health study, and it'll say, okay, if your LDL level is 180, that means that you're at the 95.9 percentile of the population. But now we could kind of slice that a little bit more. We could say, male, age 40 or something. And now it'll go and take that public health study, and it'll go and slice down in the public health study and look specifically for the subpopulation that matches those criteria. And now it'll say, okay, so for that subpopulation, you're just at the 92nd percentile. Or maybe we could say, let's say something like, we want to know what's the LDL level versus serum potassium level. And notice that the stuff I'm typing in is in kind of, I can type in sort of, hopefully, type in kind of expert speak for this field. I don't have to sort of spell everything out. Okay, so here it's giving us the comparison between LDL levels, potassium levels. It's probably going to show us, well, there isn't a lot of correlation, it seems there, but it's showing us the correlation that there might be between those two medical tests. Or we could go and let's try something else. Let's try something like life expectancy. Male, age 40 in Italy, let's say. And we could go and, now it'll go and look at data on that, and it tries to tell us something that, it tries to sort of give us useful information based on what it can compute about that. So there's distributions of survival curves and so on there's a curve of the history of that life expectancy as a function of time, and that's probably some frozen history of probably a couple of wars there that cause it to go down.